What's a story you don't tell people because they wouldn't believe it? I don't tell this story because it's just a little too strange, like a glitch in the matrix. I am a skeptic by nature, BTW, and I do think it was a big coincidence, but it's just odd as heck. So one day I'm at home and I get a phone call. On the other end is a young woman and someone called her from this number and said they had her cat. Well, I told her she must have the wrong number because I certainly didn't call her and I don't have anyone's cat. So that was it and she hung up. About 10 minutes later I go to get my mail. I'm on the first floor, leaving my apartment door open. And as soon as I open the door to the vestibule, where the mailboxes are, in sprints a black and white cat into my apartment. I go back into my apartment and there's this cat sitting, perching, on the arm of my couch, staring at me. I'm kind of surprised at this point. I mean, I just told someone I didn't have any random cats in my apartment and suddenly there's one on my couch. Anyway, so I notice the cat has a tag on its collar. Hi, my name is Skittles, not real name. If I'm lost, call XXXXXXXXXXX. So I call the number. It's the young woman who just called me 10 minutes ago. This is going to sound weird, I said, but now I have your cat. Well, she came over, looked at me very suspiciously and thanked me and left. I have no explanation for this. I accept it's a coincidence, but it's a heck of a coincidence. I like that you anonymized the cat's name. When I was 11 years old, I always used to take a shortcut through the local graveyard at night when coming back from the arcade. One night there was a storm and the graveyard was muddy. I fell off my bike and hit my elbow and head, so I took cover under a grave house to check if I was bleeding or something else. It was already dark but I could see 3 men carrying a bag and dumping it in an opened hole, then they proceed to cover it. I saw everything. When they left I went to the guard's place and told him what I just saw. He told me to calm down and gave me a cup of milk and told me to stay there while he went to check for himself. When he came back, he looked at me and didn't say a word. He called the police, but when they arrived I heard him told them I was on drugs and that I was lying. I freaked out, so I jumped out of the window, over the fence and ran home. They found a decapitated body 3 days later. That 1st of April last year, when Coffee Stain Studios was about to release Goat Simulator, their router died and they had no internet access at all. So I'm working at their ISP, and they called. So I went out to them with a new beefier router and got the network up and running again after 1 hour. And that's when I saved the release of Goat Simulator. I believe your story only because it's too lame to be fake. When I was about 8, my mother's boyfriend took me to the batting cages. If I recall correctly, the machine shot about 5-10 baseballs and then you had to put more money in. I had already been batting for about a half hour and my mom's BF told me this is my last set. So I was extra focused. I started swinging away at my final set, and I crap you not, on my last ball I swung and hit it back into the machine. I couldn't believe it. I still kind of don't believe it. So I don't really expect anyone else to, I guess. But it happened. TLDR. Hit the last ball back in the machine at the batting cages. Played baseball for about 12 years growing up. This happens every once in a while. Most people don't believe me when I tell them I got stabbed in middle school, but to be fair, the scar on my stomach looks kind of surgical. This guy had been picking on one of my friends all semester in study hall. Then the teacher left and he threw a stapler at my friend, so I stood up. He walked over and punched me in the face. We started fighting. At one point he fell against the teacher's desk, grabbed something and swung at me, hitting me in the stomach. It didn't faze me too badly at the time because my 13-year-old adrenaline was pumping. I got him in a headlock right after that and ended the fight. Blood everywhere. Apparently he had grabbed an X-Acto knife and sliced me open a good bit. It was pretty deep. Hurt like freaking heck. As soon as I realized what had happened, had to go to the hospital. Here is the icing on the cake. Because of the zero tolerance policy in the school, after there was an investigation to find out what happened and it was determined that we were fighting, I was put in ISS for the entire last week of middle school. For standing up for my friend and getting stabbed. I was also grounded by my parents. I work security at a double lockdown, inpatient psychiatric hospital. We have several units that specialize in both chemical dependence and mental health disorders. My unit is the stabilization unit, SU. So if you're really off your rocker or you feel like getting violent, you come visit me. We get a call for a possibly violent patient and I go check it out. It's a very tall, very slender young girl wearing what can only charitably be described as rags. Her hair is unkempt and clearly has become estranged from shampoo, and she is covered from head to toe in filth that I'm praying is not her own. She's in rough shape, clearly sick, and needs some help. She doesn't respond to any verbal questions or commands, but we can let her around pretty easily. I'm starting to wonder why they called me up. They tell me to put her on the SU, and a couple nurses are going to clean her up a little bit, put her in scrubs, and get her sorted out. They led her into the shower, and the patient starts screaming. Then the nurses start screaming. Then everyone starts screaming. This poor young woman is covered in what are clearly human bite marks. Everyone is freaking the frick out. The patient didn't want to be undressed and is lashing out wildly, so she had to be put in 4-point restraints, wrists and ankles tied to the bed. All the staff are in various stages of shock, crying, praying, rending of garments, etc. Someone had clearly been keeping this young, mentally ill girl captive and abusing her for quite some time. The bites are across her torso and appendages, and there are both new and old ones. The nursing supervisor immediately calls the cops and we just stand around staring blankly at each other, thinking about how fricked up people are to each other and the evil in this world. One of the nurses, who had been in psych nursing longer than I have been alive, suddenly yells, "You gotta be freaking kidding me." The patient had craned her neck over and sunk her teeth into the meat of her upper arm, blood oozing from between her lips. We had to put a spit shield over her face to stop her from trying. All of the bites were self-inflicted. She was able to contort herself in ways that I didn't think possible. I still think about her a lot, and I don't think yoga is as sexy anymore. I was a homeless drug addict living in the streets of San Francisco. I lived outside for like 2 years. I ate out of dumpsters and injected drugs outside. I am married now. I have 3 kids. I just finished 2 years as the PTA treasurer, despite being a convicted felon. I tell some people my story. I don't bother with the majority. They wouldn't believe it. That in grade 4 I made a noise to imitate the bell before it went off. Basically screamed at the right pitch and got kids to leave for recess early. Nobody believes me. When I was about 9 or 10, my grandparents and I were living in a somewhat large town in Pennsylvania. I would ride my bike around the block we lived on and never had many problems until one day it was close to sunset and I was just about to turn the last corner that looped back to the road our house was on. A large group of people were outside of their house and they were all laughing loudly and goofing off, I assume. They'd decided to sort of form a wall across the sidewalk in front of me, while more of them kind of boxed me in from behind. One of them, a guy, stepped forward and grabbed my handlebars, got right in my face and started yelling at me while his friends laughed and carried on. He pushed me off of the bike onto the ground and started laughing manically. He kind of pushed the bike hard. It landed on me, and he started moving towards me again, so I jumped up, pulled my bike with me kind of into a bush on the side to get away, got on it and pedaled like heck to get home. My grandma was pretty pissed I was banged up, but thought it was my fault for being a stupid kid. About 2 weeks later I found a newspaper on the kitchen table with that guy's face on the front cover. He was arrested for killing an old lady just down the road from our house. My grandma never believed me, but I could never forget that guy's face. When I lived in China, people often asked me what was different about life in the US. I told them in the US we don't keep small hot water heaters in our bathrooms. We have a large hot water heater in our basements that send hot water to every faucet in the house. I got called a liar enough times that I finally stopped bringing it up. In the US I was once asked the same question and I told them that in China they have small wall mounted hot water heaters in their bathrooms for showers. Again I got called a liar. There is just no pleasing some people. In middle school, a kid told me he heard on the radio that a plane had just crashed into a building. This was on the afternoon of Monday, the 10th of September 2001. I had a girl in middle school touch my no area without my consent. I always told her to stop, but being the scrawny kid in school, she was stronger than me and I couldn't get her to stop. I started skipping the class I had her in and got in trouble for it just because I didn't want her touching me. I told the teacher, but of course she said girls don't do those type of things and asked the girl if I was the one harassing her. TLDR. Girl touched my naughty area. This pisses me off so much. That is the reason why men don't say crap. Okay, so I don't like to tell this story because it's absurdly unbelievable. Like I myself don't even believe it, but my friend swears by it. A couple years ago at Bonnaroo, just after the Alt J show got out, me and my friend are coming down off some decent acid, and I decide that I could really freaking go for a Wonder Waffle. So I'm in line waiting, and I finally get my delicious ice cream treat. When I turn around and an older gentleman says to me, you know, there's only one place in the world you're gonna find a treat like that. I, being ever the quick-witted young lad I am, only responded with good, cause I'm freaking starving, which didn't even make sense, and turned around to put chocolate and crap on my waffle. When I turn around, the gentleman is gone and my friend has this dumb look on his face, and while we're walking away from the WW stand, he says to me, dude, you know who that was, right? And I say something along the lines of I don't know, some old dude, and he looks at me with the dumbest smile ever and says, dude, that was freaking Paul McCartney. And I'm just standing there with this dumbfounded look on my face that says there was no way in heck that was Paul McCartney. So that's my potential encounter with Paul McCartney, and I totally understand if you don't believe me. I don't even believe it. TLDR. May have accidentally brodozed Sir Paul McCartney. Sure, your LSD tripping buddy thought he saw Paul McCartney. I was driving after the '04 Super Bowl. Stormy night. No alcohol or anything. Highway had one lane plowed, so I am driving along. About a mile distance between me and cars from me in both directions. It's snowing but I can see well. My car was made for this crap. 4x4 big enough tires, a little top heavy. So as I am going down the road, my steering wheel all of a sudden goes crazy. Turning left then right then left, and back a few times. Caught me off guard for sure, but I couldn't stop it. The funny thing was I was still going straight. Nothing wrong. White knuckles. Adrenaline pumping, trying to comprehend what just happened. It happens again before I can calm down. I am hold the wheel as hard as I possibly can. It goes left. Regardless of my efforts, it slams over to the right, and my rear wheels follow suit. At this moment my steering wheel unlocks. Time slows down, and my experience kicks in. Start fixing it, but my car picked up speed in the other direction and just did a 300 spin, so my rear is heading to the median. As nothing I could do to fix this situation, it was clear that I was heading for some doom. But a calmness overtook me. I was going fast enough to flip my car. And if you've been in a car crash, you know the feeling of coming to a halt in an instant. Bang, my car went, stalled out from the crash. I am able to move. Look back, don't see damage. Try to start my car. It starts. Looking down the road, I see some cars coming. Figures to should get to the side or the rest stop a half mile up. My car is running fine and I make it to the rest stop. I pull into the first parking spot and run around the car since I am no longer in danger. Not a scratch on her. No dent, nothing. I have tried to work out what happened with my steering and how I walked away with not a scratch on my car, but I have no logical answer. I was put into peril and taken out by some force not of my own. Jesus took the wheel. Know how you see those women in abusive relationships with a black eye and they're like, oh, I fell down the stairs and your balls meter goes off? I had a black eye once. It looked like I had the snot beat out of me. I fell down the stairs. When I was 8, I loved to climb into trees. One day it was very hot and I was playing outside in Speedos. Close to our house was a tree I just loved to climb. The branches were just perfect. This tree was surrounded by stinging nettle. You probably can guess it already. I did climb the tree that day with only my swimming trousers on. A branch broke and I fell right into the nettles. It hurt a lot. I jumped on my bike, nettled from head to toe, and in a blind panic I drove direction home. This was on a small path going downhill. I lost control over my bike, hit a pole with my head and fainted. My neighbor friend found me and she called my parents, who called 911. I was taken to hospital with a severe concussion and nettle poisoning in my Speedo. It's almost like the urban legend where a guy in complete scuba gear was found dead in the middle of the remains of a major forest fire, and he had died by falling. A helicopter supposedly picked him up while he was swimming in a nearby lake, while it was trying to get water to pour on the fire, so the story tells. Once upon a time, long ago, the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup. It actually happened, but when I tell people they insist it's just silly mythology. I'm a Cubs fan. Always believe. My brother was chilling in his room in the basement last summer, playing Xbox with his headphones on. He thought he heard a weird noise upstairs but just thought it was our older brother getting home since he generally sounds like a herd of elephants. He took his headphones off and heard the front door slamming. He decided to go upstairs to grab a snack and see who else was home now. He ran up the stairs and noticed the air was a little hazy. He opened the door to the garage to check for vehicles indicating that people were home, and flames came shooting out at him. Our house was on fire. Turns out the noises upstairs were from a neighbor who saw the fire and ran into the house. I had left the front door unlocked when I left 2 hours previously. The neighbor had grabbed our dog and yelled to see if anyone else was home, then ran out. The fire started in the garage and spread to the roof attic. It melted our smoke detectors from above, so the alarms never went off. When my brother realized the house was on fire, he ran back downstairs because he thought I was still home. When he saw that I wasn't in my bedroom, he ran back upstairs, looked for our dog, then finally saw the neighbor holding her outside. He took 5 steps outside, saw that our mom's vehicle in the driveway was very close to the fire, and thought he should grab her keys to back it up. He turned around and there was fire entirely blocking the front door. Good thing, because if he tried to start it, it may have exploded with how hot it was. He called my parents after calling 911 and my mom laughed because she thought he was joking. He wasn't. Our house burnt down in the middle of the day, plus my mom's vehicle ended up lighting on fire and basically melted from the heat. The very next day, I received my acceptance letter for med school in the mail. Crazy story, but I don't see what's unbelievable about it. I think I saw some kind of, I don't know, spirit or demon, or some kind of shadow being once. I was doing some training one afternoon about 6ish years ago. I was in an office and there was an instructor telling us all about job safety, etc. I was zoning out, not really paying attention. It was broad daylight outside. The room I was in had about 6 monitors, and on those monitors it was displaying security camera footage, mostly the sidewalks, outside traffic. Out of the corner of my eye I caught some kind of shadow on one of the monitors, but the shadow was moving along the sidewalk very fast, and what's more, it didn't look like a shadow on the ground. It looked like a ball of shadow just drifting along the sidewalk like a tumbleweed, very fast. I caught it just out of the corner of my eye and it went off screen. I started looking at all the other screens to see if it popped up, and sure enough, it did pop up on another screen. Still traveling down the sidewalk, then it crossed the street, and I could just barely see a car stop in front of it. The shadow ball lifted up off the ground, went over the car, and then back down onto the street on the other side of the car, and on the screen I saw the car just sit there for a moment, and then take off. The shadow went completely off screen and I never saw it again. Now, as with all claims like this, it could have been anything. Who the frick knows? But it was very unsettling to see. The light would almost bend around it, wherever it would move, and it was translucent. And whatever it was, that car saw it too, and stopped. Somewhere out there, someone else saw that thing, and I'll never meet them and be able to ask if it was as weird looking as I thought it was. And truth be told, today is the first time I have ever told anyone that story. Honestly, I probably wouldn't believe me. Keep in mind this was 20 years ago. When I was 10 I told my parents I came up with a funny joke. They asked me to tell it, so I said, how did NASCAR get its name? They asked me how. I said 2 rednecks sitting on the side of the road saw a Porsche go by and one said to the other, "Hey man, that's a NASCAR." My mom started to tell everyone my joke because she thought it was hilarious. 2 years ago my mom gave me a greeting card from a well-known company with my joke on it. When I was 13 my dad started drinking with my 11-year-old sister. He told me he was going out with her to get dinner and I couldn't have any. He let her drive and she totaled the car. A cop came and let him go, and when CPS came to check on us they did nothing. We told them we were okay out of fear and they closed our case. Well, frick. It's believable, but at the time people didn't believe me. People would say that my town didn't have any wolves at all. But I was walking down my street in the middle of the night and a wolf was literally 5 feet away from me. I was walking one way and it was walking the other but watched me the entire time. I'm so glad my house was close. Of course now, 10 years later, people know there are wolves there. They kept telling me it was a dog. I know what a grey wolf looks like. My town has a lot of wildlife. I saw a huge moose running down my street, a deer with her baby, cougars and plenty of bears. Same thing happened to me. It was a huge grey wolf and people just thought I was crazy and saw a dog. I was having a depressive episode so I decided to howl at it. Keep in mind it was like 10 steps away from me, but it really didn't give a crap and walked away. I like to go hiking. Back about 10 years ago, I went out into Western NY with a friend and my then husband. We hiked through the woods for hours and were about to make camp before the sun started to go down. We came to a river, took off our packs, and suddenly I heard our friend make a gasping noise and freeze. Across the water, perhaps 20 yards away, was a creature staring at us. It was about 8 feet tall and absolutely massive in frame and musculature. We stared at it, it stared back. It felt like forever but was probably just a minute or so. Then it turned and walked off into the woods. This broke the spell and we all tossed our packs back on and ran off the way we had come. We never stopped to camp. We didn't stop until we got back to the truck around midnight. Our friend, who lives up there, said it was a Wendigo. I have no clue if it was a Sasquatch, a Wendigo, or just some enormous dude somehow freaking with us. But I will never hike in Western NY again. I don't ever want to see that again. I know people would think I'm nuts, but there is no real acceptable explanation. Sounds like a freaking Sasquatch, boys. A freaking 8-footer. I was hit by a Mack truck and had my head split open 10 years ago. They put my head back together and I am fine today. Most people don't believe I was hit by a Mack truck and survived. When I say I was hit, I mean I was hit. I was not in a car or anything. The truck lunged forward and hit me while I was walking. 2 years ago an old friend from school died while in a coma after being shot by muggers. The night he passed away, I had a dream where we were both sitting on my apartment building's roof talking about all the good times we'd had before he moved away to another country. At the time I didn't even know he had been shot, so I've often wondered what triggered that dream. My buddy put out one rap album and pretty much just shared it with his friends in college. He had a release party but it was really him buying a keg and putting it at the pool of our apartment complex while he rapped over his beats. The guy can rap but he really can't sing and one of his tracks is completely sung and is a bit cringeworthy. Fast forward to 2 years later, my friend is in town visiting a bunch of people. I'm at his friend's house one night and we've got a group hanging out in the backyard. Eventually it's time for me to get going and my rapper friend says he'll walk me out to the front of the house. 2 girls are walking up the front yard when we come around the house and one screams and says, "Oh my god, it's rapper friend." I stand back, shocked at what I'm seeing. The girl introduces herself and her friend and says, "Oh my god, can you sing? Cringeworthy song." For me, I still can't believe what's happening. Rapper friend says, "Well, I don't know the lyrics off the top of my head but I'll sing it for you once I finish with my friend here." The girl was so excited, jumping for joy. She ran off to the backyard and I walked home. Later I'd find out he did sing her the song, and when rapper friend told all our college friends what happened they didn't believe him, until I stepped in and validated the story. I don't tell anyone about my past. My husband knows, some family and some former friends. That is it. I'm now very quiet, reserved and a huge introvert. I will choose a night in at home alone, with husband and child, over anything else. However, I wasn't always this way. My early 20s I was a stripper. I traveled around the country working at various clubs. I had a twin and we'd go work features for a weekend before moving on. I dabbled in drugs, ecstasy and quit cold turkey one day after an acquaintance who was out partying with us died after I left. I've been clean since 2008. Nobody would believe me if I told them my past. They assume that I am just a shy, boring person and I am happy to let them see that. It would blow my in-laws' minds though. When I was 22, we were visiting my father in the hospital. He was real sick, but we expected him to fully recover. However, as we were in his room, he suffered a fatal aneurysm and passed away in just a few moments. You can imagine the shock we were in. And so sad. I spent that night with mom at her house because she was hearing so bad. Her heart was broken. Dad and her loved each other like high school kids, and she really never recovered from losing him. He was just 60. Late that night, mom finally fell asleep in her room, and I was sleeping in mine. Suddenly the phone rang. I figured it was family or friends calling late about our sad news, and walked down to the phone at the end of the hall. "Hello," I said, and a familiar voice said, "Skip, this is your father." I almost fainted. It cracked my mind. "Dad," I said, "where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," my father's voice said. "I love you all. Make sure your mother doesn't worry herself sick, and you be a man and protect her." "I will, Dad. I promise," I said. "I have to go now. I love you, son," he said, and the phone went blank. Not a dial tone. Just deep quietness. By sunrise, I had talked myself into believing it was all a dream. But at the breakfast table, mom said, "Honey, who were you talking to on the phone last night? I saw you walk down the hall, and I could hear you talking to someone." So I told her, and she believed me, and that's the end of my story. It's okay as you don't believe me. I'm not selling a belief system or making it up. It happened, and that's all I need to know. Thanks for your time. I've read this whole thread on mobile, and yours is the only story that gave me goosebumps. From the second I read the phone rang until halfway through this text I had chills. I believe you. I never got a phone call, but I've had messages, so to speak, from a past loved one. I hear 1-2 voices, 5-12 times a week, and see things I know are not there, like people walking into a room, come to find out it's empty, 3-5 times a month. But my family probably won't believe me. I think it's pretty weird, so I don't tell anyone, and it's not too bothering. You may want to get checked out for schizophrenia. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.